Hello, my name is James Brant, and I'm promoting my book, Setting the Record Straight. Now, I'm doing this on social media because I haven't engaged in an advertising campaign, so nobody knows my book exists or the value of its message. What I do with this book is to respond to claims against God, and in doing that, I address numerous issues because that's what the opposition addresses. But what makes my book unique is that I alone prove that evolution is nothing but a fantasy, and I alone prove the resurrection event. Nobody's ever done that. I've heard and read everything that's been used to explain these issues with. Nobody's ever proved anything with them one way or another. William Lane Craig, Ken Ham, and other apologists do good jobs at addressing these issues, but they don't prove anything with their explanations. I do. That means that my book has something special to offer. Atheists want to see evidence that God exists because they believe that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But the only evidence they're going to get is to look in the mirror and understand that countless blind accidents can't account for what they see there. They want to see God or a miracle that can only be attributed to him. But that's not going to happen because he's invisible, and he's not going to perform a miracle to satisfy their morbid curiosities because that experience will not bring them to him on his terms. We know that because those of the ancient past had what today's atheists want, but that didn't bring them to God on his terms. The Red Sea opened and the nation of Israel walked across on dry ground. When they got to the other side, the water closed on their enemies and they went, praise God, praise God. But the writer of the book of Hebrews said that they died in unbelief. That's not a mental acknowledgement of God's existence. They already knew he existed. That's a condition which they did not want God in their lives. The very attitude displayed by today's atheists. Jesus rose Lazarus from the physical dead, not the clinical dead, before hundreds of people. And they went, praise God, as well. But the Apostle John said that some of them went off to the Pharisees. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but they essentially said, hey, look, this guy's the real deal. We're in big trouble. What are we going to do? Duh, jump on his bandwagon. Richard Dawkins said that if God existed and wanted to make his presence known, he could do so unequivocally and be done with it. But that's not going to bring people to him on his terms either. We know that because he made his presence unequivocally known in the Shekinah glory in the Sinai Peninsula 3,400 years ago. That didn't work for them, so it's not going to work for Dawkins. We're here either as a result of evolution or special creation. There is no other option. Anyone that says there is doesn't know what they're talking about because they can't prove it one way or another. But do you know who has ever actually known evolution to have occurred? Nobody. No one has ever actually known that to happen. I asked atheists to prove to me that evolution has occurred. Instead of providing that proof, they criticized me for asking for it. In their desperation, they sent the JWST up and they flooded social media with entries, 2 of which caught my eye because they affect my book. They said the JWST proves the multiverse. So I listened to them intently. When they finished, I realized that they didn't actually prove the multiverse like they said they could. One of them was captioned, James Webb Telescope proves Stephen Hawking's multiverse theory. But at the end of the presentation, it said that Hawking didn't believe in it, and neither do many other scientists because it can't be proved or disproved. But I'm going to introduce to you now 3 examples in which no one has ever actually known evolution to have occurred. Evolutionary biologist Ken Miller from Brown University made intelligent design advocates look like buffoons in the 2005 Kitzmiller-Dover trial concerning the chromosome 2 fusion that supposedly shows how we came from the great apes. Miller said that chromosome 2 confirms evolution when it can't possibly confirm evolution because it doesn't address that which is responsible for it, cosmic origin. If the atheist is going to make his case for evolution, it's not going to be with radiocarbon dating, chromosome 2 mitosis, or anything else. It's going to be by his explaining how a natural universe can possibly exist. And he can't do that. And I'll explain that later in the presentation. The Christian geneticist Jeffrey Tompkins from ICR out of Dallas told me that the fusion site is not a degenerate fusion site, but is a functional feature in an important gene. Miller responded to that by saying, well, that's just wrong. The fusion site is more than 1,300 bases away from the gene based on a review of major gene databanks. But after a lengthy conversation with him, Tompkins showed Miller that the fusion site was indeed inside the gene. To compensate for that discrepancy, Miller opted for reference sequence, which elongates the cell so it may cover a wider area. He said the longer transcripts allows the DDX11L2 gene to cover the fusion site. He said the longer transcripts are easily explained by variability in the transcription so that a longer RNA can be produced. But Tompkins responded to that by saying that's completely erroneous, because the direction of transcription is the opposite of what Miller is claiming for the DDX11L2 gene. So Miller doesn't actually know, every bit as much as he knows that the sun is shining through a cloudless sky, that the fusion actually exists, much less that we came from the great apes because of its existence. The evolutionary biologist Douglas Fatuma said the creationists are quite silent on the question of why the wings of birds and bats should be so utterly different in structure, why the wing of a bat should resemble that of a monkey's hand instead of a bird's wing. He continues, they are quite silent on the question of why cytochrome C in bats, which is important in energy production and metabolism, should resemble that of whales and humans. But instead of criticizing the opposition and challenging them to explain this through the supernatural, he should have provided the proof that this concept exists through a natural process. He didn't provide that proof because it doesn't exist. The self-proclaimed atheist Austin Klein said, if a creationist tells you that microevolution can occur, but macroevolution cannot, ask him what biological or logical barriers prevent the former from becoming the latter, and listen to the silence. But again, instead of criticizing the opposition and challenging them to explain this through the supernatural, he should have provided the proof that the former became the latter in a natural process. He didn't provide that proof because it doesn't exist. 4 specifics define evolution: speculation, supposition, conjecture, and assumption. They guess at everything because they don't know. Origin is filled with examples not of what Darwin knew occurred, but what he supposed occurred. Huxley even said Darwin didn't prove that evolution happened, but that it must happen. Why would he say that? Because since God cannot be detected with our senses, then this is all we have to work with. So it has to work. It must work. So they convince themselves that it works, and they push it onto a world as though it's a virtual fact. They call evolution science, when science has nothing to do with evolution. Science tells us how things operate in the real world. It does not address origins. Evolution, on the other hand, only addresses origins if information it has not provided us with. Do I believe that intelligent design should be taught in science classes? No, because it's not science. But neither do I believe that evolution should be taught in the science classes, because it's not science either. Evolution and special creation are either 100% real or 100% unreal. We can't lower that percentage and get away with it. It does not work that way. But if evolution is not real, a natural universe must be eliminated because everything is contained within it. Secularists don't believe in a state of absolute nothingness because they believe that something must come from something else. But I saw a YouTube entry recently, one which many others viewed, but it caught my eye because it affects my book. It has over the entry the words nothing, the science of emptiness. So I listened to what these people had to say. When they finished, I realized that they didn't actually prove that a state of absolute nothingness does not exist. But I'm about to prove to you that a state of absolute nothingness is a virtual fact. The universe is a closed entity of sorts. It has edges of sorts. But if we were to hypothetically go outside it, turn around and face it, and go backwards at a trillion times the speed of light, all of a sudden the universe starts getting smaller, 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 until it finally disappears. And we keep going that speed for 1 billion years. Now stop. And the multi-universe and the parallel universe has as much credibility as Santa coming down the chimney. So we throw them out and only deal with what we do know. And the existing universe has no influence where we're at. There are no quantum fluctuations occurring here. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle does not apply to it, and neither does the first law of thermodynamics, because there are no heat exchanges. Now we're in a state of absolute nothingness. But the atheist who thinks he knows everything when in reality he doesn't says, just because you're there, it's not a state of absolute nothingness. But we're not there. We only imagine that we are. But the point being made here was that there were no laws, there were no forces, there were no fields, there were no virtual particles, there were no quantum fluctuations occurring, there was no zero-point field, there was no quantum gravity or energy states. In fact, there was no gravity at all where we're at right now, because gravity exists en masse. And nothing exists where we're at right now to be that mass. And entropy does not exist where we're at right now because it needs something to create a disturbance within the vacuum. And nothing exists where we're at right now to create that disturbance. And no one can prove otherwise. To do so, they must go to the images of the squid microscope and the G2 experiment and the CERN collider. But those examples do not prove that anything exists where we're at right now when no universe, including our own, exists. Now we're in a state of absolute nothingness. Booyah. Theologians have been saying first cause ever since Thomas Aquinas. Theoretical physicists have always been paid for doing one primary thing to get past that law. Douglas Fatuma criticizes the Christian, what he calls the fundamentalist creationists, for using first cause to justify God's existence. But he doesn't justify his criticism by explaining how a natural universe can possibly exist without that law's assistance. The British physicist Paul Davies tries to dilute the effectiveness of that law by saying the law of cause and effect is not a single force, but consists of two temporal concepts. But later in the same book, he uses that law as the ultimate entity we must get around to explain the existence of the universe. He says, what do we do with the origin problem? Oh, I know. We have a tiny loophole. It's called quantum mechanics, assisted by Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which allows quantum fluctuations to occur, which in turn allows us to circumvent cause and effect, thereby not violating the laws of physics to explain the existence of the universe. But here's the fallacy of that analogy. The strength of the principle is the field. Without the electromagnetic field, those fluctuations don't exist. And the field didn't exist prior to the Big Bang, an event that nobody knows occurred, even with the CMBR. If we're going to believe in a process or a deity, that process or that deity must be able to explain the existence of the universe. If it can't, then it's not real. That is the very core, the bedrock of this presentation, because it determines our eternal destinies. That's why evolution and special creation cannot be proved or disproved through biology, geology, genetics, the fossil record, or cosmology. It must be done with a natural universe. Does it exist or does it not exist? Secular physicists believe they know how the universe originated. But the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said that the greatest mysteries are those shrouded in origins. So nobody knows how the universe originated. They say that the universe came into existence with zero energy. I'll use Stephen Hawking's example because it reflects what most secular physicists believe. He said the universe consists of 10 to the 80th power particles. He asked, where did all that matter come from? He said it comes from energy. But then he asked, where did the energy come from? This is his explanation. He said the universe consists of matter that represents positive energy. The exact amount of gravity it projects represents negative energy. Now the positive energy exactly cancels out the negative energy so that we have zero energy. Yeah, but it doesn't tell us where energy came from, and here's the fallacy of that analogy. The universe can't be used to explain its existence because it didn't exist prior to the Big Bang. Davies asked the question, can the universe create itself? He said yes, given the laws of physics. But the American physicist John Wheeler said that the laws of physics could not have existed from everlasting to everlasting. They had to have come into existence when the universe did. So the laws of physics can't be responsible to the existence of the universe. The American theorist Lee Smolin said that if we're going to explain the existence of the universe, we have to do it from within the universe and not some agent outside of it, meaning God. But again, here's the fallacy of that analogy. The universe can't be used to explain its existence because it didn't exist prior to the Big Bang. But this is how theoretical physicists believe a natural universe created itself. They say an empty state is not truly empty, but permeated with virtual particles that pop in and out of existence within a billionth of a second, allowing quantum fluctuations to create the universe. But do you know who was ever actually known that those fluctuations created the universe? Nobody. No one has ever actually known that to happen. I asked American theorist Lawrence Krauss, did quantum fluctuations create the universe? He said yes. Then I asked him, has that been proved? He said, no. And the gravitational wave in inflation is nothing but a myth. Krauss said what all atheists say, that we can't actually prove that God doesn't exist. Sure you could. All you have to do is prove that quantum fluctuations created the universe. Because if you could do that, which you can't, but if you could, God disappears into the sunset. If they actually had the proof that those fluctuations created the universe, they wouldn't respond to useless questions from creationists that don't prove anything. They would instead stop them and say, here's the proof that evolution is real and God is not real. Quantum fluctuations created the universe. But they don't do that. If they actually had that proof, they wouldn't feel the need to debate Christian apologists, because nobody debates a proof. A proof is something that cannot be countered or responded to. It stops the opposition in their tracks. If they actually had that proof, they wouldn't feel the need to explain the Bible away. If they actually had that proof, they wouldn't feel the need to criticize and belittle God. If they actually had the proof that those fluctuations created the universe, Davies wouldn't use the laws of physics to do the work that quantum fluctuations are designed to do. If they actually had that proof, their fellow secular scientists would not still try to explain evolution to the other areas of the concept. They would instead embrace quantum fluctuations, just like theologians embrace first cause. If they actually had that proof, they would not have felt the need to send the JWST up, so now we can know what we didn't know before, because those fluctuations would give us that knowledge. If they actually had that proof, agnostics wouldn't exist. Carl Sagan would be an atheist instead of an agnostic. Leonard Nimoy would be an atheist instead of a Jew. If they actually had the proof that those fluctuations created the universe, Christian churches would be ghost towns almost overnight, because now we know God doesn't exist. But they contradict themselves concerning the concept, and nothing stands on a contradiction, which is why they say the Bible is full of them. Some say that virtual particles are not real particles, while others say they are real particles. You do see the contradiction there. Some say that virtual particles appear when the vacuum oscillates or vibrates, while others say no, virtual particles appear on their own, allowing the vacuum to oscillate or vibrate. You do see that contradiction. Still others say no, they appear when real ordinary particles get too close together, allowing virtual particles to pop into existence through the action. Another contradiction. It is said that quantum fluctuations occur spontaneously without energy. But others say that they're the random change in the amount of energy in a point in space. One says that we don't need energy to create the universe, while others say, yeah, we do need energy to create the universe. You do see that contradiction. Still others say that they are the random fluctuations in the values of the fields that represent elementary particles such as electric and magnetic fields. So without the electromagnetic field and the electrons that make up the field, those fluctuations don't occur. Again, another contradiction. It is said that quantum fluctuations create particles, but that contradicts how they say matter came to exist. They say all matter, every bit of matter, quarks, gluons, leptons, muons, protons, neutrons, electrons, and anything else was created at the point of the Big Bang. But atheists would retort by saying, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that quarks and gluons would create protons and neutrons. Really? Prove it. Prove that that happened at the point of the Big Bang. You can't do that with quantum equations. It doesn't work. Stephen Hawking said that if the universe came into existence on its own, that we could suppose that a creator created them. But he also said that the only thing that we know that existed prior to the Big Bang at such high pressures and temperatures of the singularity is nothing but pure energy. But atheists don't believe in pure energy. But when an electron annihilates a positron, the result is pure energy. So if evolution's real and God is not real, pure energy must exist without a beginning. And it can't ever. Because the most important tool in all of science tells us that everything in a natural scenario must have one. And that can never be countered or explained away. Because anything that the opposition has at their disposal to explain it with, space-time continuum, the electromagnetic field, quantum gravity, inflation theory, dark energy, dark matter, string theory, the Higgs boson particle, the Higgs field, quantum mechanics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the first law of thermodynamics, Feynman's slit, Schrodinger's cat, the Casimir effect, and anything else that can ever emanate from the mind of man are completely worthless. They're useless because they are all based on particle physics. And matter of any kind, to any degree, did not exist prior to the creation event, not the Big Bang or the Big Release. And no one can ever prove otherwise. That is the virtual proof that evolution is nothing but a fantasy. Richard Feynman said that God was invented to explain mystery. But my response to that is that evolution was invented to explain mystery, because pure energy can't possibly exist without a beginning. If atheists ask you useless questions like, who created God, or why are kids born with cancer if God is so merciful? All you do is respond by saying, what are you asking that for? There's no need. All you do is prove that evolution has occurred, because if you could do that, God disappears into the vacuum. ET's existence is predicated on the idea that everything is natural. There is no supernatural. But the natural has been eliminated with the natural universe. Atheists want to see my credentials, because if I'm going to talk about science, they want to know that I'm qualified to do that. But I'm not a scientist. I don't have to be. All I have to know is that they don't know, and that's all any of us need to know. That leads a direct line to the resurrection event. The resurrection is the most important feature in all of Christendom. Take it out of the Bible and the New Testament collapses. But the Muslim doesn't believe in the resurrection, because he believes that Allah took Jesus off the cross before he died and took him off into heaven. But my response to that is Cornelius Tacitus, author of the Annals of the Roman Empire, and its most famous section, 1544, which tells us that Christ was executed. And I show in my book that that was not a Christian interpolation. Atheists say that if God exists, then Jesus is the most plausible candidate to represent him, which is why they attack him so much. But they do him a favor by attacking him, because when they do that, they tell him that how important he is to them. Otherwise, why bother? You don't hear them attacking Zeus or Odin, just Jesus. Secular scientists have said that if the resurrection actually occurred, it would be the most important feature in all of the universe. Why would they say that? Because it will make God real, evolution unreal, and ET non-existent. That gives us the ultimate question. Why was Christ's physically dead body not produced to the people? We know it wasn't because we're talking about it when we shouldn't be. That's the very reason the Sanhedrin went to Pilate in the first place, so we wouldn't be talking about it. And of course, they mention it in the Matthew passage, Matthew 27, 63 through 64. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but they essentially said, hey, look, we made a mistake by letting this guy get to the people. Now we have a chance to correct that mistake, which is why they asked Pilate for the guards. They knew what today's skeptic doesn't want to admit to, that if Christ's physically dead body is produced of the people, Christianity dies right now and forever. The very thing theologians have been saying for centuries. But atheists are not stupid. They're clever individuals, and they think they find a way around that question. One such individual is the celebrated atheist author Richard Carrier, whose goal it is in life to disprove the resurrection. He told me he knows how Christianity can be a success even though Christ's physically dead body is produced of the people. Well, he tried to do this with the swoon theory, the hallucination theory, and the two-body theory, all of which I explain away in my book. But he didn't do what he was supposed to do. Explain the reactions of those who would have actually witnessed the event. Are they going to stay with the program? Or are they going to leave forever? He had a golden opportunity to disprove the resurrection, and he botched it. But I'm about to prove to you that the resurrection is a virtual fact with my bulletproof analogy. Imagine a 6-year-old kid. He's had his favorite candy bar in mind. I mean, this kid's almost been weaned on this thing, but he hasn't had one for what seems the longest time. And it's almost consumed his thoughts for the past 2 weeks. Now he's got the money for it. He goes in the store, puts the bar on the counter, hands the clerk the required change. The clerk hands him the receipt. He takes the bar out of the store, and there's no bully who's going to take it away from him. When you're 6, candy and cartoons are king. There is no logic or reason, the two pillars in all of science, that can explain that kid not ripping into that wrapper and consuming that candy fast and you say, Bob's your uncle, because the last 2 weeks moved him to that particular moment and that particular purpose. Just the same. There is no logic or reason that can explain why these people did not do what they so desperate when they wanted to do, produce Christ's physically body to the people. Because the 3 years of Jesus' ministry moved them to that particular moment and that particular purpose. That analogy and that question are inextricably connected. They are one. They cannot be separated. It's like separating a bird from his wings. That does not happen. So if a Jew is going to make his case that Jesus is not the Messiah, he must be able to explain why that kid will not eat that candy. And he can't ever. Nobody can. Because everybody around the world knows that's exactly what he's going to do, because that's what kids do. If Carrier or anybody else is going to mount a case against the resurrection, he must be able to explain why that kid will not eat that candy. And he can't ever. That is the first virtual proof that the resurrection actually occurred. The second proof is the Apostle Paul. He was Christianity's greatest enemy, who became Christianity's greatest proponent, and at the drop of a hat. That does not happen if Christ's physically dead body is produced of the people, and it wasn't. Some say that Paul had an attack of the conscience. Others say he had an epileptic seizure, which is why he fell off the horse. But it was God's Spirit that knocked him off the horse. That's the second virtual proof of the resurrection. The third and final proof is Acts chapter 3. God healed a 40-year-old man who never stood up on his feet in his entire life. Now all of a sudden he's dancing around, praising God, drawing the attention of all those around him. By this time they've moved out into the temple courtyard, where Dr. Luke tells us that 5,000 of them became part of the faithful by the moving of God's Spirit. That does not happen if Christ's physically dead body is produced of people, and it wasn't. Peter chides these people for being the very ones who moved Pilate to kill their dead boss, the very reason this guy's standing here. But if Christ's physically dead body is produced of the people, Peter and John don't make it out of there alive, because if they kill Jesus, you know they're going to die. But atheists freely admit that they made it out of there alive because they wrote their books after the event, because they put their names to them. That is the third and final virtual proof that the resurrection rather, is a virtual fact. Nobody has ever done that before. That means that anything that does not agree with the New Testament disappears in its presence. It also means that we know that nobody is going to put their finger on the nuclear button and we're not going to be hit by a global killing asteroid, because those scenarios don't correlate with the New Testament. I lost my board flat stomach when I engaged in a love affair with Haagen-Dazs vanilla. If you die apart from Christ, you'll lose more than I did. We live this life to prepare us for the next life. This life is a test to see where we'll spend eternity, and it's not going to be in stardust. It doesn't matter who we are, where we come from, or what we've done in this life. If we die apart from Christ, it would have been better for us had we never been born, because our eternal destinies are too terrible to contemplate. Imagine a trillion millennia from now, a time frame that makes the supposed age of the universe 13.7 billion years instantaneous by comparison, and you're still burning in the lake of fire. And that trillion millennia is absolutely nothing compared to eternity, where time has no meaning whatsoever. You cannot die. There will be no reprieve. You won't awake from some nightmare. There are three primary reasons why people don't come to God: because He remains undetectable to our senses, but any other way will not bring us to Him on His terms. 2, they believe that the evidence for revelation is too strong to ignore. And 3, and most importantly, they want to live their lives free from restriction apart from God. Jesus told us that the majority of humanity was destined to burn in the lake of fire because Satan rules this world and because we're stupid enough to allow him to do that. Hopefully, my book can help curb some of those statistics. My book is a good read, if I say so myself. It truly is worth the effort. It has only 1 review because that's all I wanted, and it's found on its website. The reviewer said that the book was well written, impeccably edited, and that no errors were found. So if you're looking for something new and different, my book is for you. I wrote this book to be enjoyable, interesting, and informative, and I believe I achieved that. But the primary reason I wrote it was to glorify Christ, and I believe I achieved that as well. My book is found nowhere but on its website, naturalvssupernatural.com. That's naturalvssupernatural.com. Enjoy what I found. You won't be disappointed. I'll see you there.